She didn't destroy you when she left. She destroyed you by going quiet and making you hear everything you'd been running from. If that already feels uncomfortably close, don't look away, because what follows may change how you see love forever. When her eyes go cold, it doesn't happen in a moment. It's not a lightning strike. It's a slow drowning, a gradual retreat of warmth so subtle you barely notice it, until you wake one morning to find winter staring back at you, lying next to the same body that once burned for you. The woman doesn't leave when her body goes. She leaves long before, in the way her touch loses its question, in the way her voice becomes a weather report instead of a melody, in the way her eyes stop asking to be seen. But by the time you notice, it's already too late, because the leaving doesn't begin with her. It begins with you. You who mistook her chaos for need. You who misunderstood her silence for peace. You who held her but never saw her. Have you noticed how silence grows louder the longer you wait for an answer? Every man remembers the first time he felt her eyes shift, not away from him, but through him. That moment when her gaze no longer met yours, but instead passed over you, like a ghost observing the living. She was still there, but not with you, not in the way that mattered. It's not always dramatic. She doesn't scream, doesn't throw plates, or stage a storm. The feminine doesn't need to rage when she's already gone. Her coldness is the closing of the temple, the sacred place within her where love once lived. But why does it haunt you so deeply? Because she's not just a woman. She is the mirror, the ancient feminine, archetypal and wild, that you once touched through her body and slowly forgot how to hold. You didn't notice the small deaths, the way her laugh stopped lingering, the way her fingers began to curl inward in bed, the way she stopped dreaming aloud. You thought love was a structure, a commitment, a role to perform, but to the feminine, love is a current, and you stop swimming. Isn't it strange that what hurts most is not what she said, but what she didn't? It wasn't the arguments, it wasn't the fights, it was the absence of longing in her kiss. Men often confuse attention with connection, but she could still text you, still sleep with you, still smile at your mother, and yet you'd already lost her. Because the feminine leaves in layers, first emotionally, then energetically, then mythically, until one day she is no longer your woman. She is the stranger you built your life around. And the wound, it isn't her absence. It's the echo, the sudden vacancy of meaning in every memory you once shared. Have you ever touched someone and felt nothing where there used to be everything? That's the wound, the collapse of something sacred, not from betrayal, but from slow erosion, not from another man, but from your forgetting to be present, to witness, to adore without consuming. Her cold eyes aren't revenge. They're the funeral of every unsaid word. But silence has another secret, one most men never survive. It doesn't just mark the end of her love, it marks the beginning of your reckoning. Because when her eyes go cold, they stop reflecting who you pretended to be, and instead they show you the man you truly are. The shadow, the forgotten self, the boy beneath the armor. She was the last one holding the mirror, and when she set it down, you were forced to face what you'd spent a lifetime avoiding. Have you ever noticed how loss doesn't just remove someone from your life? It removes the illusion that you ever had control. What you called love, what you called loyalty, what you called doing your best, she saw through it. Because the feminine is not fooled by performance. She doesn't want the polished mask. She aches for your rawness, your presence, your soul. But most men bring her only fragments, busy hands, distracted eyes, conditional affection. She waited and waited and waited until the waiting became mourning, and she realized she was grieving a man who was still alive. That's the wound beneath the wound. When the woman who once worshipped your potential finally accepts that you will not rise. And how many women have done this? Fallen in love with the future version of a man, only to find herself sleeping beside his ghost. You see, her coldness didn't begin as punishment. It began as disappointment. Not in you, but in the story she wrote around you. She gave you the role of the king, of the protector, of the conscious masculine. But you showed up as a boy trying not to feel. She touched the divine in you and watched you retreat into distraction, work, phones, numb rituals of masculinity that kept your heart sealed shut. And isn't it strange how the more she tried to reach you, the more distant you became? She didn't want your solutions. She wanted your presence. She didn't want you to fix her. She wanted to feel you, awake, attentive, undivided. But you, like so many men, confuse strength with stillness, control with containment, power with absence. And while you thought you were holding it all together, she was slowly falling apart right beside you. Until her inner feminine, the part of her that dreams, that surrenders, that opens, could no longer bear the weight of waiting. She didn't want another man in your place. She wanted you, the real you, not the armored, postured version, the soft, terrifying truth of your being, the wild man beneath the roles. But you hid, and now all that remains is the space where her warmth used to live. Have you ever begged for another chance? Not because you love her, but because you need her to forget what she saw. This is the descent, the part of the myth where the hero falls, not to die, but to be stripped. Stripped of illusions, of pride, of unconscious patterns passed down like curses from father to son. Because until now you thought love was something to earn, but she needed it to be something you embodied. And when she saw you couldn't or wouldn't, her eyes grew cold. Not because she stopped loving you, but because loving you started to hurt. But there's one thing most men never ask themselves, and it holds the key to everything that follows. What did she see in me that I refuse to see in myself? And that question, once asked, becomes the doorway. But beyond it, there is no turning back. What did she see in me that I refuse to see in myself? That question does not whisper. It roars. It claws at the soul until the scaffolding of your self-image begins to crumble. This is where the real agony begins, not in her absence, but in the slow, searing realization that you were never fully there to begin with. You mistook consistency for presence. You thought showing up meant being awake, but the feminine doesn't crave your calendar. She craves your consciousness. And now that her warmth is gone, you're left with what you've avoided your entire life, your own reflection. Have you noticed how breakups don't just break your heart, they break time itself? Memories loop, moments echo, the same Sunday mornings, now haunted by the ghost of her laughter. You try to move forward, but every room still speaks her name. And underneath it all, the unbearable truth, she left because she had to, not because she wanted to. Because the feminine doesn't leave easily. She endures. She gives chance after invisible chance. But when she goes, she doesn't go to punish you. She goes to survive. Can you feel the difference? And somewhere deep down, you know, her eyes went cold, not out of cruelty, but as the final act of a woman who stayed too long. But this is where your myth begins, because when all that remains is silence, you have two choices: collapse into victimhood or descend into the underworld of your soul. This is not metaphor. This is a psychic death. The boy within you must die, the one who sought mothering in every lover, the one who performed instead of felt, the one who feared being seen because he hadn't yet seen himself. It is here in this spiritual dismemberment that the shadow emerges. Not the darkness you show others, but the hunger behind the mask, the ache to be adored without revealing your wounds, the ego that fed on her devotion and starved her in return. Isn't it haunting how love becomes a mirror to the very parts of yourself you cannot hold? You didn't fail her because you were cruel. You failed her because you were absent. You stood in front of her, but your soul was miles away, lost in shame, performance, inherited scripts of what a man should be. And she waited, because the feminine always waits, not for perfection, but for presence. But presence cannot be faked. It cannot be summoned through will. It must be lived, felt, earned through the fire of self-confrontation. So now, stripped, alone, haunted, you must ask, if she could no longer see me, then who was I really? And the answer isn't found in the arms of another woman. It isn't found in revenge or validation or distraction. It's found in the stillness, in the unbearable silence after her departure, when there is no one left to perform for, no warmth left to borrow. Only you, and the aching truth that you have never truly met yourself. But that's where he lives, the man she believed in, the one you were too afraid to become. And isn't it wild that her coldness, the very thing that broke you, might be the heat that finally forges you? But this is only the threshold, because beyond the ashes of who you thought you were, something ancient waits to awaken. And this is the irony that breaks the heart open. The feminine didn't destroy you, she revealed you. Or rather, she revealed what you were never brave enough to become. She was not your home, she was the call to return to it. Not in her body, not in her arms, but in the silence she left behind. A silence so total, so unforgiving, that it forces you to remember the man beneath the mask. And this is where the descent becomes sacred. Because until now, you have lived half alive. You thought desire was proof of love. You thought chemistry was destiny. You thought being chosen meant you were whole. But true love doesn't complete you. It confronts you. It holds a mirror to your soul and asks, will you wake up now? Have you ever felt a pain so sharp it almost feels holy? That is the mark of real transformation. Not comfort, not validation, but the raw ache of remembering what you were meant to be before the world taught you how to hide. You see, the coldness in her eyes wasn't the end. It was the initiation. She had to go cold so that you could go deep, because you would have never descended willingly. You would have kept performing, kept seducing, kept pretending until you believed the lie yourself. But now her silence leaves you no choice. And this is the part no one talks about, the part no one teaches young men, that the true masculine is not born in conquest, but in surrender. Not to her, but to life, to pain, to stillness, to the unbearable truth that love cannot be owned, only honored. And isn't it strange how only in losing her do you finally feel everything? All the things you buried, all the shame you dressed as strength, all the tenderness you mocked in others because you couldn't touch it in yourself. The coldness cracked you open. But now the warmth must come from within. This is where the sacred masculine begins. Not in performance, not in posture, but in presence. The kind of presence that doesn't need to be seen because it sees. The kind of man who can sit with a woman's chaos without trying to fix it because he has sat with his own. The kind of man who no longer needs her to love him, to finally feel worthy of being alive. This is not about getting her back. It never was. It's about getting you back, the part of you she saw and waited for and wept for until the waiting became a kind of death. Can you feel it? That whisper in your bones, that ache in your chest, that strange, slow awakening that tells you, you are not broken, you are just buried. And her cold eyes were the shovel. But rebirth is not loud. It is not dramatic. It is not shared on social media. It is the quiet moment when you stop chasing her and begin remembering you. The way your soul feels under all that armor. The way your breath deepens when you speak truth. The way your spine lengthens when you stand, not to defend, but to simply be. Because now you know, she didn't stop loving you because you were unworthy. She stopped because you forgot how to love yourself. But here's the secret you were never told. The man who rises from this silence is the man she was praying for all along. And that man, the one forged by fire, still has one final lesson to learn. What does it mean to love without needing to possess? Few ever find out because most mistake love for ownership, for the right to name, to shape, to hold. But true love is the opposite. It is the fierce, open willingness to let the other remain free. To love without possession is to walk beside someone, not to hold them hostage with your longing. It is to witness their unfolding without needing to be the reason for it. And isn't it strange how many only learn this after the warmth is gone? You tried to keep her, tried to hold on to the image, the comfort, the story. But the feminine is not a trophy to display on the shelf of your ego. She is a force. She is motion, water, the wave that cannot be bottled. The more you cling, the colder she becomes. Because to her, safety is not control. Safety is being seen without being shaped, loved without being claimed. You thought you were losing her, but the truth is you never truly had her. You had her attention, her body, her loyalty, but you never had her soul because you were too afraid to offer yours in return. Have you noticed how she pulled away every time you reached for her with need, but no presence? The masculine, when unconscious, seeks to grasp. It wants to pin things down, to define, to name, to freeze love into form. But the conscious masculine does something else entirely. It holds space. It becomes the quiet mountain against which the river flows, unmoved, unthreatened, anchored in its own depth. Because when you truly love the feminine, you don't try to keep her. You become a place she wants to return to. But how can she return to a man who was never fully there? She needed your depth, your stillness, your capacity to feel without flinching. But instead, she got your defenses, your apologies soaked in fear, your gestures wrapped in guilt, your love filtered through control. And so her eyes went cold, not as punishment, as protection. You see, when the feminine no longer feels safe to surrender, she closes, not because she wants to, but because she has no other choice. She closes the temple, she withdraws the mystery, she becomes winter, not to freeze you out, but to preserve what little warmth remains inside her. This is the moment that breaks most men, because it forces them to confront a question no one prepared them for. Can you still love her, even when she no longer needs you? Can you love her enough to stop asking her to heal the wound you refuse to touch? Can you love her enough to let her go, not with bitterness, but with reverence? Can you love her, not because she reflects your worth, but because you now carry your own? This is liberation, not from her, but from the illusion that she was ever yours to begin with. And isn't it beautiful how the coldest goodbye can become the warmest threshold? Because when you stop reaching for her as your mirror, you become your own reflection. The woman is no longer the path. She becomes the spark, the initiator, the holy wound that split you open. So something true could be born. And what is born here is sacred. It is not loud. It is not desperate. It is the kind of man who knows how to love, not to fill a hole, but to honor a flame. Because now you understand, love without possession is not less. It is more tender, more fierce, more alive. But even now, the journey isn't over. Because there's one last silence you must face, not hers, yours. The silence that lives beneath the noise of ambition, beneath the chatter of comparison, beneath the longing to be loved before ever learning to listen. This silence is not empty, it is ancient. It is where the real man waits, not the version you built to be wanted, but the one who was always there, buried beneath the masks. Have you ever sat in a room alone with no distractions, no phones, no one watching, and felt yourself ache? That ache is not loneliness, it is returning. The world taught you to chase success, chase validation, chase women, but it never taught you how to be still, how to be with yourself, how to face the raw, unfiltered reality of your own heart without needing it to be fixed. And this is where her silence becomes your salvation. Because in the absence of her voice, you begin to hear your own. Not the voice shaped by culture or by the wounded father or by the desperate inner child, but the voice of the soul, clear, low, steady. It does not beg, it does not prove, it does not chase. It knows. Isn't it strange that the deeper you descend, the more you begin to remember who you were before the forgetting? Before you learned to measure your worth by her warmth, before you mistook desire for identity, before you confused being loved with being seen. This silence is not a punishment. It is a sanctuary, a crucible, a cathedral carved out of every goodbye you've ever survived. And here, something quiet and holy begins to unfold. You no longer want to be chosen, you want to be true. You no longer seek to possess, you seek to understand. You no longer crave a woman to make you feel whole, because now you feel full. And when the feminine meets this kind of man, a man who no longer fears the silence within himself, she melts. Not because he wins her back, but because she recognizes the depth she always knew he carried. You are no longer the beggar at love's table. You have become the table itself. And now, if she returns, it will not be out of need. It will be out of resonance. If she doesn't, you won't collapse, because your center no longer lives in her eyes. You see now, she was never your completion. She was your invitation to awaken, to descend, to die to the illusion, and rise into the truth. That real love begins where possession ends. And so the man stands in the aftermath of absence, not empty, but whole. What once felt like loss now breathes like liberation. And in her silence, he finally hears it, the sound of his own soul returning home. If this echoed something deep in you, if it reminded you of a truth you'd nearly forgotten, stay close. There's more waiting to unfold. Like this video, subscribe for the next chapter and share it with someone who still thinks silence means the end. Sometimes it's where everything truly begins.